We plant the food, we drive the cab, we load the ship, we run the lab, we build the bridges, we fly the plane, we do the work. This is our day, we do the work.
Good evening and welcome to Voices from the Village. I'm Louis LaFortune. Tonight our show is labor and right-to-work laws. And when I talk about labor, I'm talking about workers and particularly organized labor. So there is a long and storied history of labor, organized labor in this country, which has fought against great odds and been attacked, and there's been a lot of violence, mainly coming from the people who opposed workers organizing. Today, and then laws finally passed in the 1930s to enshrine the workers' right to organize. That was the high point, really, of the labor movement until, well, the 50s, the highest percentage of workers organized in this country. But there's always been pushback from the powers that be, the people who own the means of production and who want to keep their costs low. So they have fought back with laws over the years, and to limit workers' rights to organize and to better the conditions of their lives. What's going on right now is a phenomenon of increased right-to-work laws. So our show tonight will be about right-to-work laws. We're going to learn what exactly they are, what is the state of the organizing in the United States, how many states have these laws, and what are the prospects for the future for organized labor. We sent our brilliant camera crew out to Santa Cruz this week. Amy Newell went out this week with a camera and asked the question, what do you think about unions and the right to work? So here's what people on the street in Santa Cruz had to say.
This is Voices from the Village. We're in downtown Santa Cruz and we're asking people, what do you think about unions and the right to work?
Unions are definitely a good construct to exist. They do help give rights to the workers, but sometimes unions do go a little far, but mostly I think they're a good construct and should continue to exist.
As I understand it, right to work takes away the ability of unions to, reach compromises, reach agreements with big business. So I think it's not a good thing because I feel like a lot of workers are already underrepresented and underpowered, I guess. So I think that right to work legislation is not a good idea.
Last quarter we were reading this book about Walmart and about how they don't support unions for their workers, and I don't think that's correct. I think we need unions, I guess. That's all I can say. I don't know. Can you say something?
I think unions really served a purpose historically, but I think they ended up pricing themselves out of the market. So I don't know, if they work with that reality of, they've got to be competitive, it makes sense, I guess. Because there are conditions that need to be protected, but it's just when they start demanding more and more pay that's unreasonable that moves the workforce to China or wherever,
I don't know. I haven't really thought about it. I think that unions are great in some places, and in other places they sort of drive up the cost of goods. So I think it's kind of mixed on them. But I do believe in a good living wage for everybody. Absolutely, and definitely healthcare for all. But, I think I go back and forth on the idea of unions.
In my experience with unions as a manager, I've worked really well with them at times. Sometimes they've been counterproductive with the staff. It just depends on the union itself.
I don't know. I am in a union. I've been in a union for a year and a half. I've never been in a union before. I'm from West Virginia, and I moved out here as a traveling nurse. Anyway, I started working as a union, and I love it. I've heard bad things and good things about unions, but it's been 100% You know, I love it. They give you great support. Plus, it's a great thing. Unions are a great thing. Yeah, I'm very blessed to be in a union right now. Well, I worked for almost 30 years as a nurse in West Virginia, and we had none of it was union. And we were told if the union people come in here and they start talking, you get in touch with us right away. They're out of here. This is not a union place. And if you even mention union, you'd probably be fired. So they was very much stressed, very much, taboo back there. And they worked you very hard, and they could continue to work you hard. Like I was in charge of 18 patients. I'm a registered nurse. I was in charge of 18 patients back in West Virginia, and the stress was phenomenal. Everything. I mean, here you can only have 5 patients in the union here where I work, and you give better patient care, of course. And the pay out here is better too.
That's what people had to say in Santa Cruz. Back to you in the studio.
Comments of people on the street in Santa Cruz when asked about unions and the right to work. I'd like to introduce my guests right now, and we will amplify this discussion. So I'm going to start with you, Jeffrey Smedberg. Welcome to the show. And you are the former president of SEIU. I see you're wearing your button, SEIU Local 521. Oh, I'm sorry, Service Employees International Union, Local 521. And you are currently the shop steward for your workplace.
That's correct.
And my other guest, Amy Newell, thank you for being here tonight. Amy is the retired General Secretary, Treasurer of United Electrical Workers, and I'm going to grab the book right here. Because the official title of the union is the United Electrical Radio and Machine Workers of America, so it's no surprise that people refer to them as UE, much shorter. And UE, and we're going to talk about UE, and for many years you worked in the national office.
Well, actually, I worked I started out as a rank and file worker, and then I was a field organizer for many years in different parts of the country before I joined the national office staff. Okay, all right.
And we'll talk about that, because it's an important story. Again, our theme tonight is labor and specifically right-to-work laws. So what is a right-to-work law? So when do you want to take that?
Sure. A right-to-work law is a law, President Obama even characterized it as the right to work for less. So it's a misnomer, really. And what it is a law that a state can pass that makes being a member of a union and paying union dues is they cannot require that as a condition of employment for anybody in the state.
So the unions negotiate contracts with with the management.
Right.
And we're all union members here. I just want to say that here. I'm also a union member. Mm-hmm. So I've learned a lot. I've only been in a union for 7 years, but I've learned a lot since then. And I've learned that the contract that is negotiated, and again, everything is negotiated. That's an important concept that you have to understand about worker management relations, that nothing is one-sided. It's all negotiated. Right. One of the things that's negotiated is that it will be either a closed shop, is that you must be a union member, or an agency shop in which you don't have to be a member, but you have to pay some fee.
Right.
They call the agency fee. Right. Which goes to the union.
Right. Back in the ability of unions to bargain with companies is really based on the National Labor Relations Act of 1935, which allowed a union to, through bargaining, through negotiating, to become the exclusive bargaining agent and the exclusive representative of all the workers at the workplace. Now, so if a union does gain that status, then they have a legal responsibility to represent any worker who has a dispute at the workplace, in addition to negotiating a contract for a period of time that covers wages, benefits, and working conditions for everybody at the workplace. Now, of course, it does take some effort to organize and to do the negotiations and to represent workers. Amy's been a staff person. I'm sure she's had experience representing workers. I've done it as unpaid as a union steward, but I do get backup support from the union staff. It takes money to do that. And so all the workers in the workplace benefit from the work of the union in terms of improved wages and benefits. And so that's representation work. And so the union's position is that everybody who benefits from that should be paying to help maintain that representation.
And actually, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to emphasize that point you made, that under the Wagner Act, the National Labor Relations Act of 1935, the union, which is represents the so-called bargaining unit, is required to represent everyone in the workplace, whether they're union members or not.
Exactly.
Okay, so they have a legal obligation to do that. Okay.
Right. And the actual difference between the agency shop that Jeffrey was describing before, where someone can elect to become a non-member and pay a reduced fee, pay less than full dues, but they are helping to pay for the costs of representation, collective bargaining, grievance procedure, arbitration, et cetera. They do not have to pay for organizing the unorganized or the union's political action work. Right. The difference between that and so-called right to work is that in right to work, the non-members pay nothing at all. And I remember I was servicing a General Electric shop in Virginia where this one woman was a non-member. She got really shafted by the company. We fought her grievance. We took it all the way to arbitration. We won it for her, and she still didn't join the union. I mean, it's like there's absolutely no equity in that whole situation. And it's a way of dividing and weakening the union, basically divide and conquer by the employers.
Right. So no good deed goes unpunished in this case, right? Here you are putting out all your effort for her, and and I'm going to come back to this theme later on, but since I have become a union member and become a history teacher, and I have learned a lot in the last few years about this, education. This is a teachable moment, as we say in education. And when unions are under attack, particularly teachers' unions, are apparently everything that's wrong with this country can be laid at the feet of teachers' unions right now. And we'll meet on my yacht later on for drinks, because we're so well compensated. Where was I going with that? So anyway, that it is education. This woman doesn't understand at some level that this is to her benefit.
Yeah.
And so she continues to act against her own interests by not becoming a member of the union.
Yeah, and where the right to work laws are the absolutely most damaging is in newly organized workplaces. I suspect that the long organized factories in Michigan and Indiana, you're not going to have vast numbers of union members dropping out of the union just because the law has changed. They know the benefit of a union. But it's when you've come through a hard-fought union organizing campaign and perhaps won the election very narrowly, and first contract bargaining is very difficult. That's where it's really hard to consolidate that membership base, and that's where right to work can just be a killer, my experience.
I have a coworker in where I work in the county government, and he's very politically very conservative, but he's very smart, and we have some great discussions about issues, including unionization. And he doesn't like what the union does with political money. I mean, a lot of our money we spend on politics is donated independently of dues, in addition to dues in the COPE contributions. But the union does spend some money in political education among members and uses dues money to educate its members. Well, he doesn't like to spend his money, he doesn't like to see his money go that way. So he is a fee payer, a non-member, and he pays the representation fee, and he doesn't pay the portion of dues that has anything to do with politics. But I asked him about right to work, and he said he really understood this issue about the union having to represent people who didn't pay anything, and he said, I'm a real conservative, and I don't think freeloading is a conservative value. I see that there's a lot of value in the union in representing me and in negotiating a good contract. The only part I don't like is where they spend their money on the politics. He was not...
Good conservative values.
Right. He was definitely not going to argue in favor of right to work.
Good.
So that's a strong term. I'm impressed that someone who is opposed to union political spending it still has the ability to understand that when you're being represented by anybody, that is you're receiving a service, which in this case is representation, that you have an obligation to pay for it.
What I have tried to the argument that I've tried to convince him on is that, he's saying, why can't I be a member and vote on my contract just because I'm not paying for the political money? And I said, what we do, our ability to negotiate a good contract for you depends on our political power too, because it depends on who's in office and what kind of state laws are being enacted in Sacramento, and the only way we set up good conditions for pensions and health care is by having political power too. And so if you really want to be a full union member and have a say on bargaining, then you need to support the political program as well. Maybe you don't agree, but at least be involved and you can have a say in how we decide our political program.
And political action is a lot more than just who we elect, too. It's also lobbying for higher minimum wage and for increased workplace health and safety laws and all the other things that benefit all the working people in the state. So.
Right. The best interview on the street interviews that we saw at the beginning of the show, the gentleman said, well, I don't know if we need unions, but what we really like to have a living wage and health care for all. Well, how does he think we're going to get that unless the working people organize for it?
Exactly.
So, and let's talk about that for a minute. What do unions provide workers in general? I mean, we see that famous bumper sticker, and I don't see enough of them. Unions, the folks who brought you the weekend. So let's talk about briefly the history of labor organizing and when it began. What were the big issues back in the 19th century when unions were, frankly, illegal?
The 8-hour day.
That was...
Yay. I mean, people fought and died for the 8-hour day.
Standard was work 6 days a week, 10 hours a day.
Yeah. And, more recently, I don't know if you guys felt the same way, but listening to this political campaign that we just went through and hearing talk about the middle class, what they're really talking about is the working class people, but because of their unions and all the struggles that were fought, are earning a decent living. And that big post-war boom following World War II, when you saw that huge, the income distribution was fewer at the top, lots in the middle, and fewer at the very bottom. And now that you've seen the kind of hollowing out of organized labor, it's becoming an hourglass. The few extremely wealthy at the top, fewer and fewer in the middle, and more down at just, subsistence levels almost in this country. And I think rebuilding the labor movement's your best anti-poverty program. I mean, strong unions win a bigger share of the wealth that's created for the working people and their families who created that wealth. And, until we see the rebuilding of some kind of worker power in this country, we're going to have a real problem with it. I mean, we're becoming a third world country in terms of levels of inequality.
It's quite ironic that one of the events that really helped create our modern day working middle class was the great General Motors sit-down strike in Flint, Michigan in 1936. in 1936 and 37. And that's when the workers had, not working under very poor working conditions. They finally had enough, and they were able to organize broadly enough to make General Motors, the biggest corporation in the world at the time, give in and allow them to organize a union. And not only did they get better pay, they also got health and safety. They got safety conditions which they'd never had before. Workplace injuries were widespread, and that was...
And seniority protection, so the boss couldn't pick and choose who was going to get promoted and play workers off against each other, but there was a fair system for advancing people. And
you're old now, get out of here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And what happened in General Motors happened in the rubber industry, the steel industry, the electrical industry, and that, that explosion of organizing is what really brought working people up in this country.
In the early 50s, as you say, after the World War II, the big economic boom we had, there was kind of a compact between the labor, the unions and the corporations that was boom times, and the corporations basically, in order to gain labor peace, to have a minimum of strikes and so forth, they agreed to share some of the profits. And that's when unions were 36% of all our workforce. 36% of all working people in this country were members of unions. And then it became more and more common for people to have pensions through their work, and to have decent vacations, and to have some health care benefits, employer-paid health care benefits.
Right. And the non-union employers had to match the union standard.
Right.
If they wanted to try to stave off unionization of their workforce, they'd have to meet that industry standard set by the unions. So it really had an uplifting effect on all the non-union workers as well as the unionized workers.
Right. And definitely kept on with the 8-hour day, which had been fought a century before. But what's happening today with the decline of union membership, we're even losing the 8-hour day. There's a lot of people whose wages are so low they have to take another job. They don't have the 8-hour day anymore.
Yep.
No. I'm going to let our viewers know, I haven't said this earlier. This is a live program tonight, January 13th, 2013. We have a phone number, 425-8844. If you have a comment or a question about our topic tonight, we're talking about labor, organized labor, and right-to-work laws. My guests tonight are Jeffrey Smedberg, former president of SEIU Local 521, and Amy Newell, longtime labor organizer and
don't make me sound too old.
And activist. You have a wealth of experience. Let me put it that way. So I asked the question a few minutes ago: what have labor unions done for us? That is, the people, in modern terms, the 99%, the people who do not own the factories, do not own the banks. And you started with the 8-hour day, and that was a long and bloody fight, and many people died for that in the 19th century. Wealth distribution, you mentioned that, evening out. We had these massively powerful and rich people, the so-called robber barons, back in the Gilded Age, who lived better than kings. And it evened that out. So that's
a bigger share of the pie for the working people.
They got a bigger share of the pie.
That's right.
Never a big share.
Never enough. But it was better.
Nothing fair, but something approaching equity. Child labor.
Very good point.
Yeah.
Child labor was commonplace. And I'm rereading this, the classic novel, The Jungle, right now, which has to do with the Chicago stockyards, the meatpacking industry, my hometown. By the time I grew up, there were no stockyards. They were gone. But the story is still widely known in Chicago about the yards and the organizing, and then the mansions. I remember touring Philip Armour's mansion on Halsted Street in Chicago. Armour was one of the huge meatpacking, still is a big meatpacking company, and he built this. I could only describe it as a fortress. in downtown Chicago. It's huge stones and nothing. Looks horrible from the street. It looks like a prison, but it's lovely inside. But a lot of that in the jungle, the novel about the meatpacking industry by Upton Sinclair, we learned that people not only worked 14, 16 hours a day, 6 days a week was very standard, but also the children were, because the wages were so low that the children had to go to work. The family couldn't get by without their labor. And it was particularly women organizing to get the right to vote in 1920, but then backing up the labor unions and saying, no, our children should be in school. And not only that, but child labor depresses wages for everyone because they pay the children less. And then the injuries, of course. Right. So that's one thing that the union movement has succeeded in eliminating for the most part, is child labor.
Equal pay for women was a huge struggle. In fact, UE, the union that I was associated with, filed the first claim in the War Labor Board during World War II, challenging General Electric and Westinghouse and their practice of paying two different rates for a given job depending upon whether the man was performing the job or the woman was performing the job. And that was an ongoing struggle for many years. I know in some of the electronic assembly plants, the janitor, a man, would be paid more than the women on the assembly line who were actually producing the product, making the profit for the company. But that was a sort of gender, unequal pay for the same work that unions have fought so hard to eliminate. We're still a long way from doing it, but
we are. Yeah, I'm sure you recall when Obama was elected, when he took office back in 2008, 09. One of the first things he did was sign the Lilly Ledbetter Act, and Lilly Ledbetter was famously a woman who was being paid at a lower rate than her male counterparts.
For doing the same work.
For doing the same work. And still today, the number, I think, is 75 cents for women to every dollar that a man makes. So we do not have equity yet.
There is a short film about Lilly Ledbetter and her struggle against the gender discrimination called Never Got a Dime, because after she didn't win. She finally got Obama to sign a law, but she didn't win any money on her claim. Oh. Anyway, the short film, jumping ahead a little bit, we have a short film about her story that we're going to show at the Real Work Labor Film Festival in April. But we'll come back to that later.
Okay, but let me write it down, because if I don't, if you don't remember it, I sure won't. Right. So I'm going to write it down.
But I wanted to just go following up on the right to work. One of the reasons we're having this discussion tonight is because just in December, the Michigan state and the Michigan state governor signed a right to work law in Michigan, making it the 24th right to work state, I believe.
I think that's right.
And the irony is that Michigan was the birthplace of basically the United Auto Workers and Flint and the General Motors strike, sort of a key place where we can say this is where the history of growth of the creation of our middle class came from, and now that state is a right to work state.
And the way they did it, that lame duck Republican legislature rammed it through before their terms expired. I mean, we'll see what the repercussions of this are. I'm optimistic that's going to be reversed in Michigan.
We'll see. Let's take the opportunity now. We have a couple of film clips. The first is from the BBC, and it is a short. A lot of it's just raw footage of the protests in Michigan. So as you mentioned, in December of last year, December 11th, I believe it was, Governor Rick Snyder of Michigan signed into law a right to work law for the state of Michigan, which had been passed, of course, by the Michigan legislature, and which did what right to work laws did. It said, you don't have to join a union in a workplace, and you don't have to pay any fees and all that. So huge protests from the organized labor in Michigan, the home of, in some ways, the home of organized labor. And it was actually during George Romney, if you recall, George Romney, the father of the recent presidential candidate, Mitt Romney, was for many years governor of Michigan. And he had labor peace. He supported unions in his state because he understood how important they were to the auto industry in Detroit. So anyway, I'm digressing. Let's watch that. We're going to watch the BBC video, and let's go straight to then, if we can, without a break, to the CBS video, which has a short interview with Governor Rick Snyder. So let's roll those now, please.
The tent, and they didn't want to respect our space. We just wanted a small space. We reserved the Capitol, and we wanted a civil debate. There was a lot of swearing and stuff last week, and we scared a lot of our people away. Unfortunately, that wasn't good enough. That wasn't good enough. They had to trample our tent. They got out their knives. There were people trapped underneath the tent. There were people in the
members from across Michigan and other states voiced their anger at the Michigan Capitol. Mike Huerta has been a member of the United Auto Workers Union since 1997.
No one wants this in this state. This state is where the birthplace of the United Auto Workers. This place is where unions built the middle class.
But Republican Governor Rick Snyder insists the legislation will help workers by not forcing them to join unions or pay dues.
If they don't see value in the union in terms of its activities, should they be forced to pay financial resources for that? I don't believe so. Give them choice.
The governor and Republican lawmakers argue the legislation will attract businesses and keep jobs in Michigan. Union members argue it will result in lower wages. Clear evidence for either argument is inconclusive. Workers in right-to-work states do earn $300 more than their counterparts in non-right-to-work states, according to data collected by a group arguing for right to work. But 5 of the 11 states with the highest unemployment have right-to-work laws, including Nevada, which has the highest unemployment rate in the nation. United Auto Workers member Reggie Smith has been a union member for more than 35 years. He warns Michigan voters have long memories.
You've spoken to the people, and they're speaking back to you today, and they'll take care of you when it comes down time for election again. I guarantee you.
Scott, if he runs for re-election, Governor Snyder will face the voters in 2 years.
So scenes from the protests in Michigan after the signing of the right-to-work law there by Governor Rick Snyder, and the unions there have, of course, vowed to take action against the governor politically. Choice. Rick Snyder.
Yeah, could I speak
Please.
about that choice?
You go right ahead.
Yes, he said the reason for right to work is to give working people choice. Basically, it's a freedom issue, right? Mm-hmm. But he and the legislature in Michigan disrespect so much the police and firefighters that the police and firefighters in Michigan do not have the right to work. They were exempted from the law. I don't get it.
Okay, so the right to work law does not apply to public
does not apply
employee
to police,
unions.
Does not apply to
Safety
apply
unions.
to safety. The
Okay.
police and firefighters, they're exempt from the right to work.
Same thing in Ohio when they passed the anti-union laws in Ohio. They exempted police and firefighters, unlike Wisconsin, where they had that big backlash.
So they don't deserve the choice, apparently.
They don't want to make political enemies with the firefighters and the police officers,
no.
so that's why they're not messing with their unions.
Okay.
And I would like to say something about what I think is a completely bogus thing to say that wages in right-to-work states are higher than wages in non-right-to-work. What makes up an average wage in a state might be affected by a huge number of things, like what are their major industries? Is it agriculture, or is it manufacturing, or is it, but there is absolutely no doubt that the union salaries for people working the same occupations are much higher among the unionized workforce than the non-unionized workforce. And that seems to me the valid comparison.
Right. I actually did look up that statistic. That was a study done by the National Institute for Labor Relations Research. And it's a self-described anti-union organization. And the way they came up with that conclusion that people earned more in right-to-work states, it was adjusted wages based on the cost of living in those states. And because the right-to-work states' cost of living is so much lower, that relative to the cost of living, it looked like workers' wages were a little higher.
Yeah, and that's totally bogus. Let's compare what a carpenter makes in New York versus what a carpenter makes in Mississippi.
Right.
And you'd see the unionized states the unionized workers are going to have much higher rates than non-union.
Those numbers came from, as she said, I have to give them kudos for at least saying that this was came from an organization that supports right-to-work laws.
Right.
On the other side, the Economic Policy Institute found that wages in right-to-work states are over 3% lower than those in non-right-to-work states. After controlling for many other variables. The rate of employer-sponsored health insurance is lower in right-to-work states, so the workers are somewhat less likely to get health insurance. Also, pensions, all 5 percentage points lower in right-to-work states. So the workers make less, they don't have insurance at the same rate, and their pensions. Also, particularly striking, the unemployment rate in right-to-work states is higher than in non-right-to-work states. And in fact, they said the state with the highest unemployment in the country, Nevada, is a right-to-work state. So it doesn't seem to help. And this is how they're trying to sell it.
But what we think is the real reason that people are in favor of right-to-work laws is because the effect is that it will lower labor costs. And labor costs are lowered by workers getting less money and benefits, less pay and benefits.
That's right.
And that's supposed to be a business advantage, especially since...
For whom? Exactly, but, well, I just had to say that. Who benefits?
Right.
Shareholders.
We should always ask that question.
Executives.
Cui bono, right, as they say in Latin. To whose benefit?
Right.
So,
well, it depends on how you look at it, because when the general population is working and earning decent wages, they spend the money and they buy the products which generate the profits for businesses. But what we have in the world today is a more and more a globalized economy where companies will offshore their production, and they'll take the whole plant and move it to a place where they can pay lower wages. And so that's true that in an area where the workers are well organized and getting good pay and benefits, it's hard for those workers to be competing on a strictly monetary basis with people in a third world country where there are no environmental laws and no labor laws.
No right to organize.
Right.
Yeah. So yes. So what's happening? The United States, American workers are being pitted against workers in India, in China, in Bangladesh.
In the race to the bottom.
Right. And is that what we want?
We can't win that.
Do we want to compete with them? Look at the way they live. Look at we had this disaster in Bangladesh recently when over 100 people burned to death in a garment factory which makes clothes, for Walmart, for Ralph Lauren, for all these major brands. And it was like the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire of 1911. Right. In fact, more people died in this one than died at Triangle, which is legendary in American labor history. And as the same thing, the doors were locked from the inside,
so no one would steal.
So that no one would steal, and the bathrooms were locked, so people couldn't go to the bathroom during their,
Yeah.
It's just these horror stories.
As far as working people go, nobody wins the race to the bottom. And what we have to strive for is a globalized labor movement that can stand up to globalized capital and bring the bottom up. So we have rising standard of living, throughout the world for working people. And it's a long-term project, but it's the only way we win.
Talk a little bit about your history with UE. This is a legendary union in labor circles, and I'm going to thank you so much. This is your copy of Labor's Untold Story. This book is out of print.
No.
Oh.
We just issued a new edition.
Okay, and this is published by UE, United Electrical Radio and Machine Workers, written by a couple of their members, I believe. This one was. And it is an amazing story. It's just incredible. It's labor's story told by labor. When you read history books, and again, I teach history, and when you read history books, you often get the, history is written by the winners, is a truism in history. So the winners are, the manufacturers, the industrialists. The workers are not the winners. So this is the story, the workers' story. And I highly recommend this if you can find it. It's just brilliant.
Oh, it's easily found. You can Google UE, and that will take you to the UE website, and you can order the book there. It's very inexpensive, and they will ship it to you.
Okay.
www.ue.org.
Okay, from UE's own website.
Or just Google UE,
Yeah, okay.
They've got a very good website.
Okay. So talk about UE. Talk about this union. Where was it mostly, electrical? So it was in the giant electrical companies like Westinghouse and General Electric.
General Electric, Sylvania, the machine tool industry in New England. United Electrical Radio Machine Workers of America. It was the first union chartered by the SEIU in 1936, and grew out of an unsuccessful effort to break down the craft unionism of the IBW and the machinists, which was kind of male only, whites only, skilled workers only, and turn them into industrial unions that organized all the workers who worked for the same employer. And when there was especially long concerted effort, my father was involved in that, to turn the IAM, the machinist union, into industrial union. And when that failed, the only thing to do then was to form a new union. And that was the UE, the United Electrical and Radio Workers at first, and then eventually the machinists when people came in from there. And it's a little bit of a renegade union. I would say a lot of American labor was sort of domesticated by World War II. And union leaders got used to serving on war labor boards with their corporate counterparts, and we had a no-strike provision, so they got used to arbitrating grievances instead of striking over grievances. And the UE just refused to give up a lot of its basic principles. We have a constitution to this day that prohibits the national officers from earning a higher salary than the members we represent. Democratically elected union. It's a rank and file union, and we ended up having a big split with the CIO in the late 1940s, coming out of World War II and the McCarthyite period and the red baiting attacks that went on. And the CIO actually created a whole new union to supplant the UE, but they failed. Which was the IUE.
The IUE.
The IUE was founded specifically to replace the UE. And so we had pitched battles where workers had to fight to defend the union that they had or go over to the other one. And it was in the, it was that McCarthyite hysteria, and the UE was red-baited very, very heavily. But they failed to destroy us. UE and the West Coast Longshoremen, ILWU, have a lot in common in that respect. And we're the only two survivors of there were 11 unions expelled from the CIO for being communist-dominated.
For being red, yeah.
And I believe the UE and the West Coast Longshoremen are the only two that still survive. And we're still, around and kicking and running the Republic Windows factory occupation and the Walmart warehouse strike in Chicago a few weeks ago.
So let's talk about Walmart. I mean, the picture for organized labor is very bleak in this country, but there are some bright spots, and one of them is the largest. Well, I don't know if they're the largest employer in the United States. Walmart is the largest employer in Mexico. They sell 1/4 of all the groceries in this country are bought at Walmart stores.
They're also the #1 gun dealer.
Okay, all right, and that's a hot topic, isn't it? So finally, Walmart workers are standing up, and they're, completely anti-union at Walmart. They fire anybody who talks about unions, as the woman said in the video, right? The West Virginia woman. If you said the word union, you were out. So UE is helping the Walmart workers organize?
Well, they're actually warehouse workers that are contracted by Walmart. And we know one of the worst things about Walmart is not only how they treat their own employees, but how they force their contractors and suppliers to force their workers' wages down as well. And they've done that with the warehouses that handle the merchandise that's coming in from China and Pakistan and Turkey and wherever. And so there's one effort going on in Southern California to organize warehouse workers. And Jeffrey, do you know is that an SEIU effort or a UFCW or a Teamster? Or, I'm not sure.
I've heard UFCW and I believe SEIU, at least peripherally, has been supporting that.
Yeah, and the UE is the primary one trying to organize those warehouses outside of Chicago. And then on top of that, they've organized this Our Walmart, which is a rank and file worker effort within the Walmart chain to fight for improved wages and working conditions. And they, in addition to the warehouse workers, there was a whole number of, not majority strikes, but groups of Walmart workers walking out on Black Friday and intermittently ever since. So, I mean, they got a long way to go, but it's certainly a hopeful sign.
Yeah, and that was in protest to the expansion of Black Friday into Thursday. They were requiring workers to come in on Thanksgiving night, right? Leave your home, leave the dinner table with your family, and go to work. And for many workers, that was just the last straw.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. So the efforts to organize at Walmart are still very small. We'll have to admit that it's very small because there's so many workers. But this is a historic step because up to this point, we didn't know of any workers who were brave enough to stand up to that at all.
Right.
Of course, another bright spot is the Chicago teachers' strike. And from all accounts, they were out of, the teachers walked off the job, I think, for 8 days or 10 days.
So.
A little over a week.
At the beginning of the school year.
Right, right. And everybody was saying, "Oh, you're going to piss off the parents. This is a bad idea." But they had,
massive support.
Yeah, they had massive support from the public and from the parents because the parents knew what was going on. They'd been seeing this for a while, and so by all accounts, this was a successful strike that they did. There were a lot of takeaway demands, and they pushed almost all of those back. One of them in particular was to connect teacher evaluations and pay with test scores, strictly just on test scores. And of course, that's totally crazy.
No, yes, it is. And what happens? I'm a teacher and I've been following this issue. And when you connect pay to anything, right, like a test score, for instance, what happens? People cheat. So there have been all these cheating scandals now in which administrators are telling the teachers, well, you're going to have to find a way. and they erase answers. They go through and they change answers on tests, and
The Atlanta one was...
So yeah, it's horrendous what's going on there. And you're right, Amy. The teachers union, the teachers of Chicago enjoyed massive support from the parents of the children who were attending the schools there. Chicago, by the way, has an unelected school board. The whole thing is completely undemocratic. Rahm Emanuel, the mayor of Chicago, appoints the school board. Yes. So, you know, the idea that this is democracy in action somehow, that the Chicago public schools are some kind of democratic institution, no way. It's an appointed school board. It's just shocking to me when I learned that. Of course, the school district that I work in, we elect our board members.
Right.
And we, of course, the union, we try to elect board members who are sympathetic to the interests of the students. I mean, it's all about education in the end. You know, what are the students getting?
And that strike in Chicago, I know I have a friend whose daughter was very involved as a Chicago teacher. That was preceded by a solid 2 years of rank and file organizing. They elected a reformed leadership to guide their their contract bargaining and organizing, right at the site level, teacher to teacher, and then with the parents and the community as well.
We're not,
I just wanted to point out that, you're mentioning the undemocratic school board in Chicago. I just would like to emphasize that unions, working people's organizations, are democratic organizations, and any union, any working person who chooses to be a union member then has a voice in determining all sorts of things that their union does.
Thanks for pointing that out, because corporations are completely undemocratic, but workers' organizations are, especially UE,
to one degree or another,
union. We're going to have to leave it there tonight. I'm sorry we're out of time, and I want to thank both of you, Amy Newell and Jeffrey Smedberg, for being with us tonight to talk about labor. This week, or 2 weeks ago, we marked the passing of a great labor organizer, activist, musician, songwriter, producer. John Fromer died on January 2nd of this year. He was born in 1946. He worked in San Francisco for many years. He was not only a TV producer and performer, but again, he was a labor activist. He produced shows for KQED, including the science show Quest, and he composed, we know that one. He composed his the theme song, We Do the Work, for a PBS series about America's working class. He won 13 Emmys for Northern California television, worked at KRON, produced many shows there. His true passion was making protest music. He was a member of the March in Selma, Alabama, and he was everywhere and always a tireless activist. When there was a picket line, he showed up with his guitar and sang labor songs to keep the spirits of the strikers, to keep up the spirits of the strikers. He died earlier this year, just a couple weeks ago, of stomach cancer. And we're going to go out with his music tonight. John Fromer, We Do the Work. Thanks for joining us. Good night.
Moms for a world that is humane. Gonna take us all to make a change. Take us all to win the peace. Gonna take us all in the streets. Gonna take us all. Gonna take us all. And your neighbors, poets and the painters, socialists and the anarchists, the pacifists and the humanists, Every culture and community takes black and white and brown.
Yeah, that's it. Okay. So we have a couple extra minutes here, and Jeffrey, we were going to come back to Real Work. So talk about Real Work.
Yeah, the Real Work Labor Film Festival has been putting on a week-long series of film and cultural events since 2002 was our first year. I think this is going to be our 12th year.
12th year?
I think this is our 12th year. This year it's going to be, we always do it around May Day, May 1st. So it's the end of April and the beginning of May. This year, in 2013, April 27th to May 5th. I mentioned we're going to have that film about Lilly Ledbetter. We're hoping that there's a filmmaker did a film about the Republic Door and Window takeover several years ago, and he came and presented that film. He's now working on a film about the Chicago teachers' strike, and we hope he's going to have it finished, at least a rough cut, to show on May 1st, on May Day at the Del Mar Theater. People can find out more information about that at our website, www.realwork.org. That's REEL, as in a movie reel. And this is one way we are trying to counter the negative attitudes and opinions about unions, is to show in film some of the history and the struggles and what it took to get us the weekend and the 8-hour day.
All right, great. Thanks, and we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks again for joining us tonight. Thanks to our all-volunteer crew here at Voices from the Village. We'll see you next time. Good night.
Nations, all colors and all creeds, put an end to war now, put an end to greed. Gonna take us all to make a change, take us all to win the peace. Gonna take us all in the streets, gonna take us all. It's gonna take us all. We need the immigrants and the unions, the Greens and the gays, hip-hoppers and the beboppers and the women for equal pay. Farm workers out in the sun, homeless out in the rain, seniors and the soccer moms for a world that is humane. Gonna take us all to make a change, take us all to win the peace.